Welcome to a dolphin communication project, Dolphin Lesson. Today we are going to talk about animal creativity, and this program is going to be led by Dr. Deirdre Yater, one of our most favorite, wonderful DCP friends. Dr. D is a professor at Sacred Heart University, and she is well-versed in animal research on a variety of species, including the topic of animal creativity. I am hopeful that Dr. D will be back down to DCP's Bimini field site this summer. So if you are a university student looking for something fun to do, get some academic credit, head to our website and you can soon find details on that program. You will, if you're listening live, you'll see your microphones are muted. That's on purpose. So please use the chat function to submit your questions, and we'll get to questions at the end. You can submit the questions to everyone or just to DCP, and you'll see Nicole is also monitoring the chat. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. D.
All right, well, thank you for having me to chat with you all today. I'm excited to share some of the research that I've been involved in with animal creativity. So this is a big area of research in the field of comparative psychology. So I'm going to start with that and talking about, my screen. So what is comparative psychology? So basically we're talking about comparing many different species and see if they think in similar ways. So just like Kel said, not only do I work with dolphins, but I've done some research with other species as well. So you can see here we've got kids and dogs in these pictures. And so I'm going to talk about some research today that I've been involved in looking at these animals related to the topic of creativity. I guess I should go back and mention that I have not worked on creativity alone. I have many collaborators at different facilities, including DCP's Dr. Dzinski. At Sacred Heart University, I work with Dr. Dawn Melzer. At Eckerd College, Dr. Lauren Heifel. At Roatan Institute of Marine Sciences, we have head trainer Terry Bolton. I'm going to talk about her, and Dr. Heather Hill from St. Mary's University. So this is a group effort. But I wanted to know, first of all, think about who here that's watching this video has a pet dog. So many of you maybe are familiar with having pet dogs, or you have a family friend who has a pet dog or a relative who has a pet dog. So think about that dog. You've probably observed dogs since they're family pets. Do you think that dogs are creative? So some examples here I gave, maybe does your dog figure out a new way to knock over the trash can? Or perhaps maybe your dog is able to combine puppy dog eyes with a whining noise to get an extra belly rub from you. Or does your dog find a clever way to jump up and get a treat out of a cupboard? So I want you guys to take a second and just think about any examples of dogs being creative that you can think of. And I put in here animal play. So this is one thing that maybe you're familiar with, watching animals maybe in the wild. You saw some squirrels chasing each other, or you see the dogs playing with one another. Are they being creative? So we're going to first talk about kind of naturalistic observations of animal play. So I put in, of course, a video here with some cool dolphins from, make it a little bit quieter, but these are the dolphins from Bimini, the Atlantic spotted dolphins. So this is work with Cal and DCP, and you can see the dolphins here. In a minute, it looks like they're kind of playing with each other. Are they varying their behavior? Are they being creative? There's Cal swimming into the screen. So when we're watching wild dolphins, we're trying to interpret the context of the behavior. So if it's playful, maybe, if it's social, they're interacting. Are they doing this in an innovative or creative or new way? That's one thing that we might be interested in as researchers. So that's kind of hard sometimes to differentiate. Are they being innovative or creative when we're looking at wild animals? This is an example in the wild. And then I'm going to get to more controlled settings where we kind of work with laboratory experiments, if you will. All right, so you can see the dolphins here. They look like they're playing. They look kind of creative. Think back to times you've observed your dogs playing with each other or someone's dogs in a dog park, and you can see maybe they're being creative, or you think, wow, they're pretty smart, right? So that's what we're kind of testing. I have another example here of animal play that maybe is more illustrative of something that you might think of as, wow, that's creative. That's a new behavior. That's different. So here I have a beluga whale. Oh, and he's blowing bubble rings. Oh, and the other beluga comes over and is playing with the bubble rings. So this looks like it's a kind of innovative or creative or new behavior. They're creating a play object, the bubble. So that's kind of cool, right? That seems like it's innovative or different. And this is something that's like a naturalistic observation, meaning we're looking at this and it's spontaneous. They're not being told to do these bubble behaviors. They're just naturally producing those bubbles. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about when we ask in like kind of a more controlled setting for animals. I'm going to start with humans, with kids, with asking them to be creative kind of on cue or on command, or when we ask them to do something different. So why is creativity important? Well, we want to know how smart humans or animals are, and sometimes we use something called intelligence tests to find out how smart people are. So an IQ test, if you've heard of that. And here with IQ tests, the typical responses would be written, or they involve vocal responses, talking. Since we're humans, we take it for granted that it's really easy to test one another because we can talk and we can write. So we want to know in animals or nonverbal children, without talking and without writing, maybe how smart they are, right? So creativity is one way we can look at that. And we're kind of looking at an original behavior or a behavior that's useful. Like I said, your dog figuring out a way to get a treat that's hidden in a cupboard out on their own. So that's a useful behavior, right? They're getting a reward. Okay, so our current methodology that my group of collaborators and myself were using, we were looking at a way to measure really young children, so preschoolers, age 5 and younger, and to see if they're being creative without using any vocal responses. They are not telling us an answer, they're showing us with their body. They're being behaviorally different. They're kind of modifying their actions or changing up their behaviors. So with this technique, we're able to look at very young children or possibly children with a developmental delay. So hopefully you guys are familiar with the game Simon Says. Okay, so if not, I'll review this, where you say, Simon says, touch your head. Simon says, touch your nose. Simon says, wiggle your fingers. Stick out your tongue. Hopefully I didn't catch any of you guys because you know how to play Simon Says. So this is where we're kind of training kids to use their body to respond to these questions. Simon Says in this case is the cue. So what is a cue? This is a way that we can train small kids or animals to do something next. It's like a hand gesture or that verbal cue. Like when I said Simon Says, you knew what to do. So this is also called in scientific terms an SD or discriminative stimulus. So we use this method with local Connecticut preschoolers, and we train them to learn the game. Oh, now I do something different when I hear the cue. So just like Simon Says, you do something different, or you copy the behavior, you do the same action. All right, so if you have a cardboard box at home, I want you to grab it, or at least think about it if you don't have one right handy. You could pause this if you're watching this later and get out your cardboard box. But this is a classic animal training kind of enrichment activity that Karen Pryor, who is one of the pioneers in creativity research, starting with dolphins, created this 101 things to do with a box. So I want you to think about right now, get out your box. What could you do with this box? What could you pretend that your cardboard box is? Or what actions or behaviors, what could you do with the box? Could you climb up on top of the box? Could you get inside of the box like this puppy? Could you decorate the box? Could you pretend the box is a race car? Could you pretend the box is a fire truck? Could you pretend the box is a police car? So I want you to try and play this game when you have time and think about how many new ideas can you come up with your cardboard box. And if we were doing this as a training activity to teach this game of creativity to an animal or to a preschooler or a kid, we would give them a little reward after each time they come up with a new idea, like a treat. So maybe an M&M for a kid, or saying good job each time they came up with a new idea to use their cardboard box for. And I'm sure most of you are familiar. Cardboard boxes are super fun. You can do anything you want with them. You can build towers. So this is a great example. Now, the science part, we would tally up or count each of these different ideas you had for the cardboard box. And that would kind of be your score, or how smart you are in terms of creativity. And that's what we're looking at. And you know, your dog can play this too. It is an enrichment activity. If you do have a dog, you could try and see how many things they can do with the box. And I'm giving you an example here on the next slide. This is my son, and he created a space shuttle in one cardboard box for himself. And his little stuffed animal puppy also has his own little space shuttle. And this is just one of a variety of exciting cardboard box games that he has come up with. So hopefully you guys can try this at home and have some fun with your cardboard boxes, and you'll be doing creativity tasks. Okay, so how did we actually test preschoolers in a scientific way in this experiment? So my colleague, Dr. Dawn Melzer, came up with this little what's next game. This has never been studied in young children using their body movements. So usually in this kind of creativity test is only given to older kids who can write a response or talk. So in this case, the game was the no one, someone, everyone game. So you had to learn how to use your body and not an object. So there's no boxes now. You can't use a toy. And you had to be able to modify or do these different behaviors. So in the first day, we trained the preschoolers when we went into the preschool to understand this. Every time we said no one, they put their hands together. When they said someone, we moved our hands about 6 inches apart. When we said everyone, they put their hands as far apart as they would go. All right, and so then we just kept switching it up. We would say everyone, no one, someone, no one, everyone. And they would have to move their arms in the correct position. And so we played that game a bunch of times with the kids. They would understand that they had to kind of move their body on cue or on command when we said those words. The next time we went in to see the preschoolers, the same kids, we would say, what's next? And this was the what's next game. They had to come up with a new action or behavior or body movement. And then everyone else in the class copied them. So sort of like Simon Says. So I might say, what's next? And then maybe Kel would put her hands up and wiggle her fingers like this near the side of her head. And then everyone else in the class would copy her and do the same behavior. So we had to learn kind of that moving your body and coming up with different actions, different ways to move your body. The third day we went in to test the preschoolers. This is when we collected our data, our science data. we would say, what's next? And we gave that verbal and hand sign. And the kids would then have to come up with a different behavior each time we asked, what's next? So they might do jumping jacks, they might blink their eyes, they might spin in a circle, they might kick up their leg, they may sit down on the floor, you know, a whole variety, anything they could think of. This is the creativity, right? And each time we said, what's next? And they did a different behavior or a different action, we would give them a sticker. And so that was their reward. And we kept going and kept saying, what's next? Until they kind of were stumped and they couldn't think of anything different to do. If they kept doing the same behavior over in a row, if they kept doing jumping jacks, we would say, okay, the game is over, and they would get a little prize, like a little children's book as a prize. So you can kind of see how that evolved. This is, again, the first time this was looked at in small kids. I'm going to relate that data, what we found, in a little bit, because we compared it with dolphins. So that's the comparative psychology part. That's super cool. But I have another game for you to think about right now. Since this is aimed towards older children, you guys maybe could think about writing down responses. So how creative are you? Can you think of a variety of ways? How many different ways could you use a brick? Okay, so this is, again, like that cardboard box idea, only a little bit more advanced now, because we're not using our body. You have to write it down. All right, so I'll give you a couple minutes, or I'll give you a little bit of time here. You could pause if you're watching this at a later time. You could pause the recording and write down as many uses for a brick that you can think of. Okay, so if you've written down some responses and you've unpaused the recording, let's take a look at what some of these ideas mean. So first of all, if you just count how many different ideas you have for using a brick, it doesn't matter if you think it's a good idea or a bad idea, just count the exact number that you wrote down, and the number of different ideas you wrote down would be your fluency score for creativity. So how many different creative ideas could you come up with for this brick? Okay, the next way the scientists might score this using the Torrance test of creative thinking would be to use categories to group together your responses. So how many behaviors or ideas for the brick did you write down that were similar? So if you put build a house and build a wall, those might be in the same category. I'm trying to remember what my son, when he did this, what he grouped together. He had like he built a house. He said he built a bunch of things. So that was all one group. He threw bricks at some stuff, so the throwing ones were all grouped together. So the number of different groups or categories you have now, that would be your flexibility score, how flexible your creative thinking is. So that's another way that scientists would look at this. All right, so if you have next a really original response that's different from other people who wrote down these ideas. So let's say we did this with your group of friends at school. And if your friends have different ideas than you, then one of those ideas would be more original because it's more different, it's more unique to yourself. So maybe you said you might use the brick as a weapon, and that's not as common of a response. So that might be considered more original in terms of your creativity response or your creative thinking. And finally, we'll look at how much detail you put in your idea for using the brick. If you wrote down that you might make a tombstone out of your brick for your dead pet who is named Fluffy, now that's really detailed. That's a lot of elaboration. So that's a very creative response in terms of looking at how elaborative your thinking is about using the brick. So these same ways that we just talked about this is how we're going to code the preschoolers and the dolphins that were tested in a controlled setting. Okay, so when I told you about how we put the create behavior on cue using that hand gesture, different hand gestures, or using the word, what's next? All right, so when we ask that, now we count up the preschoolers or the dolphin, or you'll see the killer whales in a minute. How many different behaviors or responses can they think of each time they're asked, create that hand sign, the what's next? That will be what we'll be recording. Then we have flexibilities, the number of different categories of behaviors. So for dolphins, we grouped it, and preschoolers, we grouped it in terms of low energy behaviors, maybe like just standing there and blinking for a child was a low energy behavior versus doing big jumping jacks was a higher energy behavior. And then same thing kind of with the dolphins. So maybe they stood in place or they just sat there right in front of the trainer and they spit water. That might be low energy. Or if they're doing big jumps, that would be high energy. But again, dolphins could do many different types of jumps out of the water, and that would be considered the same category. So it would be different for fluency because they had a back jump and a forward jump, but they're still jumps. So we would group them together, just like we group together building a brick wall and building a brick house. Hopefully that makes sense. And then when we get to originality, we would say how common is the response that the dolphin gave us compared to the other dolphins. So we tested before this research that my colleagues and I embarked on, there were only 7 dolphins that had been recorded in the scientific data for looking at this creative behavior. Although it's very common if you go to a facility that houses dolphins to have them know this create behavior as kind of a fun task to show people how smart they are, maybe in a dolphin show or something. So this behavior is, the create task is common, but being scientifically studied, it hasn't been as common. So we are able to gather a lot more data on dolphins at 2 different facilities. And here, finally, the elaboration might be how detailed or how complex the behavior is that the dolphin or the preschooler gave us. So maybe combining different behaviors. So the child that's spinning in a circle while jumping up and down and wiggling their fingers or touching their head or something, that's more elaborate, right? Okay, so I already mentioned Karen Pryor. So this is a little bit of the science. She kind of pioneered the study, remember, with the 101 ways to use the cardboard box. She was a dolphin trainer and also worked with dog training. And her first animals that she studied were rough-toothed dolphins. So those are different. The animals that we studied have been bottlenose dolphins. And here, only completely new or novel behaviors were recorded as being creative. So sea lions have also been studied. Again, any behavior now could be recorded, including those that have been previously trained to the animal. So same thing with these bottlenose dolphin studies. You can't repeat the same behavior more than once in a row. And you could include behaviors that you've been taught to do or trained to do if you're an animal. So same thing with the kids at the preschool. If when we played the kind of what's next game on day 2, they did some behaviors like the jumping jacks or spinning in a circle or jumping up and down, they could use those again on day 3 because they previously learned them. So that's kind of like what we mean with the dolphins. So you know that some dolphins have been, you know, trained to do different behaviors, like a certain type of jump or spitting on command or on cue. Those behaviors would count towards creativity. They just could not do the same behavior in a row more than once. When they had repeated behaviors, we would end the data collection session. So here, these are some of the cues or hand signs. This is Terry Bolton at Roatan Institute of Marine Sciences, and she's showing the create hand sign here, and you can see some of the behavioral responses. So one of the dolphins is swimming towards the right and waving the pectoral fin, their left pectoral fin, and then they get a reward of fish. And then she'll ask the same create sign again, and now the dolphin will have to perform a different behavior, not waving the same pec fin on the left side. So that's the training part of it. When we were doing the data collection part, we had video cameras at the surface here, as well as underwater. So we were able to look at underwater behaviors and surface behaviors to see if the dolphins are producing new behaviors each time she gave the create or what's next sign. So these are some examples. This forward bow, the jump, the leap out of the water. Again, they've been trained to do this. They know how to do this behavior, but they were doing it when she just said, show me something new, create, what's next? The video or the picture on the bottom is showing a spiral swim underwater. Kind of hard to see the motion because it's a still picture, but we were able to get more detail by looking at the underwater videos to see that the dolphins were doing something different. So this is a little bit of the procedure I wanted to show you from dolphin encounters in the Bahamas. And you can see here a different cue for what's next. It looks like this. So each time the dolphin will get a little reward. See the different behaviors. That's create, what's next? So this dolphin is combining behaviors also with doing spitting and whistling. The shark swim. But you can see the dolphin is varying her behavior here, changing which behavior, even though he's giving the same create or what's next cue each time. And he's using his whistle, just like Terry was using her whistle to say, good job. And then the dolphin will get the reward or the fish, just like the preschoolers got a sticker. Okay, so you guys get the idea. She's awful cute though. All right, so when we combine the data that we collected for the kids and the dolphins, we found that both the children and the dolphins produced about 10 to 16 behaviors each time they had a test session, meaning each time we sat down to test them, once they learned the hand sign or the cue for what's next or create, they had about 10 to 16 different behaviors. So that's a lot, right? That's like, could you come up with 10 to 16 each time I gave you the cardboard box or asked you to write down a list of things you could do with a brick, right? So that's basically their fluency score, if you want to think of that. Also, when we talk about categorizing, so the flexibility score, we found that children preferred the moderate energy behaviors. Maybe they marched in place. compared to dolphins who demonstrated more low energy behaviors when we categorized them. So the dolphins, we tried to compare directly to the children, which is why we looked at how big or little the behaviors were. And the lower energy behaviors seemed more prevalent with dolphins. So they might stay right in front of the trainer and do spitting or something like sink down, but something that's kind of right there. So less likely to do one of these big jumps that I'm showing in the picture at the bottom of the screen. So again, we're still trying to do these direct comparison, comparative psychology results, looking at two different, very different species, right? We've got our dolphins and our preschoolers. And the overall, we found when we were looking at those like trained behaviors versus behaviors that were completely new or innovative or never seen before, the children were more likely to create or show us something different that was completely original or new, or an untrained behavior versus the dolphins. The dolphins tended to stick to behaviors that they had kind of that they knew how to do. We call that like in their behavioral repertoire. They knew how to do these behaviors because they had been asked to sing on command and make a singing noise, or they had been asked to do these behaviors before for a show or to demonstrate to people when people come to the facility to learn about animals. They want to hear their noises or see how they jump out of the water. So these animals had been trained to do them before. So when they were asked to create or show us something new, they kind of stuck to those behaviors that they knew, that they had been trained and reinforced for in the past. Whereas the kids were more likely to come up with completely new original behaviors. So the originality score looks like it's different for the preschoolers being more original. However, if we combined trained and untrained behaviors, preschoolers and dolphins, there was no significant difference, meaning they were really both similar in their originality scores. So it kind of depends on how we look at that information. But kids, obviously, we only worked with them for 3 sessions or 3 different days, and they didn't have as much training on the task, where the dolphins that we worked with, they had lived most of their life, if not their entire life, in human care. And so they had a lot of experience with trained behaviors from their dolphin trainers, asking them to do something to get a reward of fish. Okay, so the next step, kind of new and exciting. Dr. Heather Hill and Kathleen Dzinski are looking at killer whales, and are killer whales creative? So let's see, the same hand sign for create or show me something different was used with these killer whales. So the killer whales are from SeaWorld, San Antonio, Texas, or Marineland in Antibes, France. And there are 9 different killer whales, and they were able to perform more than 50 behaviors in each session. So that's a lot, right? That's even more than we found for the preschoolers and the dolphins. They also appear to be flexible in which behaviors they choose. So they have different categories. They showed elaborate or complex behaviors, and they were able to come up with new combinations of familiar behaviors. So that's where I said the trained behaviors, the familiar behaviors, they could come up with different combinations of those. So this killer whale data is very new, and this is ongoing research. So stay tuned for more exciting results from the killer whale study. Okay, next, I wanted to bring it back to dogs. I asked you in the beginning of this talk to think about your own pet dog, or if you're familiar with a family friend who has a pet dog. And dogs, you guys were hopefully able to come up with some ideas. Oh yeah, they are creative when they try and get that treat, or when they're playing with another dog. It seems like they're doing creative play, and they're doing something different or unusual or funny, right? So let me see if I can, this is research that's being done by Dr. Lauren Heifel at Eckerd College, and she said I could share a video with you guys today. So let me see how to pull it up, because here we go. Oh, so I need to reshare my screen. Hold on a second. Okay, it looks like it's working. My screen is sharing now, and you should be able to see a dog video. So in this video, the dogs were trained the same way that we worked with the preschoolers and the dolphins and the killer whales. So here, the dogs are learning in this video how to be creative. So they're learning the create cue, and it's verbal. You'll hear the trainer will say create, as well as give a hand gesture. So also the dogs know other behaviors on command, and they're pairing the two hand gestures, which is how we taught the dolphins how to do this create, how Terry Bolton taught them how to do create, let's say in Roatan, at the Roatan Institute of Marine Sciences. So same behaviors here. This is a kind of training session, not a testing session or a data collection session. So let's see how it works. Because you see pairing a hand sign that the dog knows with the word create and getting a treat or reward. So her saying yes is like saying good job, or the whistle being blown to the dolphin. Okay, so you guys get the idea. That's the training session. So next time when she's testing this behavior, she would use just the command, and then the dog would have to come up with those behaviors on their own without any additional cueing. And okay. Oops. So that was the dog data. Dr. Heifel is still collecting this data, but she did say so far the results indicate that the dogs were able to vary their behavior. So they were able to, in the testing sessions, meaning when they weren't given additional cueing, they were just shown the create sign, they were able to come up with different behaviors. And they were able to be somewhat flexible in terms of the categories of behaviors or different types of behaviors that were grouped together. But she's still processing and looking at that data, and probably more work needs to be done for the dogs. So that's exciting. And since I'm talking about dogs, I was going to end with this cute picture of one of the dog friends that I made this past weekend, wearing little tutu And I hope that you guys are interested in the topic of creativity, because I think there's a lot more to learn about animal creativity. And I just focused on the species that I have personally had some experience working with. There's a lot more out there, especially when you're looking at examples that exist in the wild. But these are the kind of controlled testing sessions we were able to do with animals that work with humans. So it's kind of exciting, especially from a comparative standpoint, to look at the children, right, related to these different animals. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the presentation today.
Thank you so much. Before we get to, maybe we'll have time for one question or so. I'm just going to wrap up so folks know where to find other DCP programming. If the slide will go, there you go. So you may be watching this recording, so you already found us. But if you're looking for more, you can head straight to DCP's website, dolphincommunicationproject.org. Look under that education tab, and you'll find the webinars, and they're all there. If you prefer YouTube, they're also all posted there. Cleverly, our channel is now called Dolphin Communication Project, so we're a little bit easier to find now. This was a dolphin lesson geared toward elementary students. We also have deep dives, which are a bit more technical. And then if you've had all of your webinars fulfilled and you want to catch up on our podcast, you can find the Dolphin Pod anywhere you get your podcasts. We also have kids science activities. So those are also under that education tab on our website, and those are free to download PDFs. Some of them are activities, coloring sheets, word searches, a variety of things there that you can access anytime. And of course, DCP is a nonprofit. We're thrilled to offer these programs at no charge to you. And in that is possible because of our awesome guest speakers like Dr. D. So a huge thank you to Dr. Yater for putting this talk together for us. If you'd like to support DCP, here are some ways that you can do it, especially if you're catching this recording headed into the holiday season or maybe graduation season. You can adopt a dolphin, become a member, and as I mentioned at the start, you can even join a field course or an eco tour, particularly to our Bimini field site, and maybe you'll get to see Dr. D there. And stay in touch. So our website, our email address, social media, all of those things there. So one question that we had, Dr. D, is, can we say that dolphins and dogs have imagination? Is that a term that's used?
Well, imagination? I don't know. That's a link to creativity, the idea of imagination. And I don't know if that's been studied like scientifically yet. So I feel like that's a really good question, maybe like a next step. I think it depends on how you define imagination. So is imagination maybe part of the creativity task? It's hard because imagination, like we need to make these definitions, the behavioral definitions, we have to make them behaviors because we can't talk to these animals, right? And we can't ask them what they're thinking. So we're looking at their behaviors to give us indications of what they're thinking. So the create task is trying to look at imitation or imagination, I would say, in a way, but imagination maybe is a little bit different, right? Because we can ask adult humans about imagination because those are creative thoughts, whereas we're looking at the creative behaviors. So it's a little bit different, I would say.
And again, where imagination can sometimes, you're imagining something that you are not capable of doing. So if I imagine myself flying, I maybe use my creativity to imagine that thing that is a fantasy, but I couldn't do that in my behavior because I'm not physically capable of it.
And scientifically, we don't yet know, like, we know that animals are capable of planning for the future, but we have a lot of flexibility in our thought that we can think a lot about past behaviors or past ideas and future things that haven't happened yet, or like Kel said, may never happen. So we don't know if animals can do that yet.
That's why the work is never done. So youngsters listening, there will always be more for you to do when you grow up. So
Yeah,
awesome.
comparative psychology is a relatively new field, so.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and your creative talk, Dr. D. And thank you to everyone who joined live or is listening to the recording. We hope to see you at another DCP program in the future. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.